Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Damon.
Howdy. And Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
And 2.5 months into the lives of both these consoles, it is still very difficult to find for a lot of you out there. And unfortunately, it doesn't sound like that is going to change anytime soon. AMD expects PS5, Xbox, and PC chip shortages to continue through the first half of 2021. Unfortunately, although they did say there is added capacity in the second half of 2021 that should hopefully help. Since these are so scarce, so hard to find, and there isn't that much exclusive next-gen content to play on them, do you think that the release should have been delayed into further into 2021?
I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, yeah. I really genuinely don't think that we would have really missed a beat had these machines launched a year later than they ended up doing. Nobody saw the pandemic coming. Nobody saw the semiconductor shortage coming. Nobody saw, a lot of this situation coming. So yeah, and the reality is with the pandemic has delayed a lot of stuff, and Halo got pushed out, and on the Xbox side, I mean, Sony's had let's see, Demon Souls as a PS5 exclusive so far. They've got Ratchet and Clank coming soonish, seemingly. But yeah, like we could have had some killer day one launch lineups if these had launched in fall of 2021, and I think we really wouldn't have missed too much throughout the course of this year.
Jonathan, were you surprised to learn that these delays, we should expect them to go through the first half of the year? Because I know that both manufacturers have said in the past that they would expect delays through April, but the first half of the year is a little bit longer.
It's a couple extra months, but no, it absolutely, it's definitely unfortunate, but I don't think surprising really. Even just with a console launch in general, we tend to see shortages around hardware supply. And I definitely think had either console maker been able to make more for launch day, they would have sold more of these units. I definitely think the demand is there, even if, as Ryan said, I definitely don't think there were a ton of must-play games on day one or anything. Definitely some great games, but yeah, it is definitely an unfortunate thing, because I think the thing I see more than anything as the discussion topics around the next-gen consoles, especially within the Podcast Beyond community, is just people going, when am I going to be able to get a PS5? They just don't know when supply will be available. There hasn't really been communication from Sony down to fans about when expectations can be for new major drops of hardware. People are often waiting on Twitter feeds to drop a tweet at 2 a.m. I've been talking to someone in particular who stayed up till 5 a.m. because of an alleged rumor that there was going to be a drop at a major retailer, and then it didn't happen. And so that's kind of where we are when it comes to hardware sales right now. And so just any sort of word that we can get something like this from AMD, I think is great to know that they are saying, hey, there will be some shortages. We hope to have things in a more stable capacity by the second half of the year, but that does give you I think a very strong idea that things will be a little bit rougher for the first 6 months of 2021. I just wish we were also getting that word from PlayStation and Xbox.
Well, Ryan, in spite of both these consoles being so difficult to find, it sounds like things over at the House of Xbox are going swimmingly from a revenue perspective. Xbox hardware revenue is growing, and Microsoft has just reported record earnings. The gaming sector, Microsoft's gaming sector, has revenues up 51%. Hardware saw the biggest growth to the launch, thanks to the launch of Xbox Series X and S. And Microsoft says the gaming hardware segment grew 86% because of new hardware, though the company hasn't shared exact sales numbers. We don't know exactly how many consoles it sold, but Microsoft wants people subscribing to Game Pass, and now we know there are 18 million Xbox Game Pass subscribers out there now. So does all this have you feeling good about Xbox's situation?
Financially, for sure. It's, and what's interesting too about that 86, I think, % number that you said on the gaming hardware growth, that's with a supply constraint that we just talked about. They couldn't even get as many consoles out as they would have liked to. So yeah, I mean, it's the financial health is there for not just Microsoft, but the gaming division. I mean, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago when people were starting to openly whisper about, well, is Microsoft going to give up on gaming? And obviously they clearly haven't with all the acquisitions they've made, but now all of that's paying off. Like they're building this up the right way from a both a sort of software and services perspective and a hardware perspective, and financially it's paying off. But now it's just they just need to cash in on all that, start delivering on all the money they've spent on Bethesda, on all these studios,
Mhm.
and get the software out. And so that's what we're hopefully going to be finally seeing later this year, and then hopefully starting in 2022, the whole first party drought thing will just be a talking point of the past.
Now, Jonathan, I'm not sure when we should expect Sony's earnings similar to Microsoft's here, but I would definitely expect them to be very positive, at least in their gaming sector. The PS5 has been very warmly received by those who are able to, purchase the console. But does anything that Microsoft reports, does any of it sort of raise an eyebrow for you to be something that Sony should be worried about?
Not necessarily. I definitely think they will be keeping an eye on the fact that something like Game Pass has been doing so well and is getting so many subscribers. I think we've seen them directly respond with stuff like the PlayStation Plus collection being an added benefit for PlayStation Plus subscribers on PS5. It's not nearly the same thing, but I don't know that we'd necessarily have gotten that had Game Pass not become such the dominant talking point of Xbox's reasons to believe in that platform. And I think they've been doing a lot of good there. I also think, on a one-to-one level in terms of critical success, I think it's easy to say last year that PlayStation had the more critically well-received games, but Microsoft has been also, in addition to Game Pass, looking into more service-based games on a first-party and exclusive level. And so things like Sea of Thieves and even Grounded, which we didn't review particularly highly, but a lot of people have loved and stuck with. We're seeing a lot of Xbox games be games that have a longer tail like that, whereas Sony continues to really focus on those big first-party blockbuster, more action-based single-player narrative games, and are letting the third parties handle sort of the ongoing multiplayer side of things. So it will be interesting to see if they continue course on that, if Microsoft's success in certain sectors like that will cause them to change face. But at least for the next year or so, we kind of have a good sense that Sony is going to continue doing what Sony has been doing pretty well for the last few years.
And Damon, those financial numbers from Microsoft are a good reminder that the console war is more of a fanboy community point of
Yes.
argument in the gaming sphere than it is within the walls of Microsoft. Because clearly,
Yeah.
you can criticize Microsoft, mostly at this point on the software side, but things are going pretty well in the old pocketbook.
Yeah, even if Xbox is third place behind PlayStation and the Switch, you can be in third place and still be wildly financially successful. That's what we learned from this. It's interesting, Jonathan. You talk about Sony sticking to its guns with big AAA single player experiences. I guess the exception that proves the rule is Destruction All Stars out on PlayStation Plus next month, right?
Yeah, that and of course, Gran Turismo 7 coming down the pipeline.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's probably one of more the exceptions that prove the rule for the PlayStation stable. But yeah, I mean, Destruction All Stars it's not completely internally developed; it's sort of
Mm.
co-developed with Sony XDev, and then Lucid is the developer itself. But it is definitely a gamble that they haven't necessarily done in a while. Sony has done multiplayer games before. That's definitely been a big part of it, whether it's stuff like Resistance and Killzone on the shooter side, or even things like Warhawk and
Mhm.
PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. They've tried, but this will be an interesting one, and I think it is a very smart choice to put it on PlayStation Plus from day one, because that is going to ensure probably a lot of PS5 owners are PlayStation Plus subscribers. So it's going
Yeah.
to ensure that there will be a easier, more easily available player base right from the jump.
Now, Ryan, I believe we have a legitimate Xbox exclusive out this week with the Medium,
Yes,
and,
sir.
and apparently great. We gave it a great score. We gave it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, can you sort of like remind us exactly what the Medium is?
Yeah, it's a sort of psychological thriller. I've been playing it. I'm only about an hour or so in. I encourage everybody to go read and or watch the IGN review on either IGN.com or YouTube.com/IGN. But it's definitely, as a longtime Xbox gamer, it gives me some really strong Alan Wake vibes in a good way. I mean, it's
Mm.
not exactly the same kind of game, but kind of that third person. It's fairly slow paced. It's not as much about combat as it is about sort of just investigating creepy things. But it's really interesting. I'm having a good time with it so far, and I'm looking forward to playing some more of it.
Jonathan, is the medium something you wish you could play on your PlayStation 5?
I mean, I would always love more games to play to get trophies, honestly, but I will be more than happy to boot up my Xbox Series X to play it. I do love horror games, even though I am very easily scared, and I'm very glad to hear that this is a great one. And again, I think we've said on the show before, but especially going back to Ryan's point about the console wars being more of an ethereal message board thing than a thing with the companies. Each system having great games only encourages the other to keep trying to have more great games. So having a great Xbox exclusive to start off the year is an exciting sign, and I hope it's a sign of things that continue to come.
And speaking of the 18 million subscriber number on Game Pass, I mean, the medium launched straight into Game Pass, which is an awesome thing. That, I mean, this is a third-party game, but we're going to see once those first-party games start coming, they're all launching into Game Pass, and hopefully we'll see more third-party exclusives like this do the same.
And that's not the only notable game launching into Game Pass this week. Cyber Shadow also did the same. A very cool 8-bit platformer that IGN also gave an 8. So those are two very welcome additions to Xbox Game Pass this week. Real quick before we go, late last week we got some updates on Resident Evil Village. We now know that's coming May 7th, which is actually just a couple weeks before PS5 exclusive Deathloop. And I think Resident Evil Village looks great. I loved Resident Evil 7. I'm very much looking forward to it. However, they did announce that in addition to next-gen versions, there are going to be last-gen versions coming as well for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So my question, Ryan, we can start with you. Is that something that we should be worried about because of the whole cyberpunk situation?
I mean, maybe. It remains to be seen, right? Like, it's possible that when it was announced, Sony only wanted it shown, or somebody only wanted it messaged as a next gen thing, and then they kind of come in, which that's what happened with Spider-Man, right, with Miles Morales. And that game seems to have ultimately ended up being received well. I think the thing to worry about a little bit is, I mean, obviously there will have to be some toning down of the performance settings and visual settings in order to get RE8 to run and look acceptable on the PS4 and Xbox One. And the question is, how far will they have to go? Like, is it going to be like 900p at 28 frames a second? Like, is it going to be pretty lousy, or is it going to totally be a excellent experience? That depends on how scalable the RE engine is, which I'm not a programmer. I can't speak to that. So maybe, but I'm not immediately concerned.
Yeah, and it's obviously not the same type of game that Cyberpunk is. Not a big open world game. There's not as much going on underneath the hood, I don't think. Jonathan, how about you? Does the last gen versions raise any red flags for you?
Not immediately, similar to Ryan. I think on the next gen side, I'm definitely not worried about how the next gen side looks, because we did get a PS5 exclusive demo alongside that showcase called the Maiden demo, and it looks beautiful. Granted, again, it scared me extremely easily, but it is a gorgeous demo, and I have no doubt that game's going to look phenomenal on both next gen consoles. As for last gen, same to Ryan, obviously don't have the programming knowledge, especially of this engine, but knowing that they've also developed RE7, which was a similar, first-person mode, as well as Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 for modern consoles, last gen, I guess now. I do have hope that they'll be able to pull it off, and I think the biggest thing will just be they need to show it before launch to prove to people who are going to buy it that it is worth investing in that version.
Okay, before we go this week, we have the results of last week's poll. We asked you, which of these MIA games do you think you'll see first this year? We're talking about games like Beyond Good and Evil 2, Dead Island 2, Dying Light 2, and Biomutant. And the winner was Dying Light 2, which is funny because since that episode went up, Biomutant has gotten a release date, and we know we're going to be playing that one in May. And there have been no updates on Dying Light 2. We're still waiting on that. So once again, we have forced the developer's hand because of the show, and we got a release date for Biomutant. You're welcome, everybody. Your poll for next week is: do you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass? Maybe you don't because you don't own an Xbox, but if you do own an Xbox and you don't, that's interesting. That's an interesting choice you've made that we'd like to hear about. Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next week. And that about does it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathan. We'll be back next week, next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more news on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. We'll see you then.